eligibility were enough, then refusals would be far more rare. But they're not. They happen every day to people who are eligible and meet all of the rules. This episode matters because eligibility creates a false sense of confidence. People read the program page, they check the boxes, and they assume approval is just a matter of completeness. And when the refusal comes, the reaction is the same, but I qualified. And what they don't realize is this: eligibility only answers if you're able to apply. It does not answer whether an officer is persuaded to approve you. And the gap between qualifying and persuading is where refusals lie. Here's what I see in refused files over and over. Applicants who technically meet the requirements, who filled the right forms, paid the correct fees, applied in the right category, and submitted the documents on the document checklist. But the notes don't say applicant ineligible. They say things like, I'm not satisfied, I have concerns. And those words matter. They tell you the refusal wasn't about the rules, it was about doubt. And doubt is discretionary. The biggest misconception in work permits is this: if I meet the requirements, the officer's going to approve me. Wrong. Eligibility creates the permission to apply. It doesn't create the obligation to approve. Two very different things. Officers aren't there to find reasons to say yes. They're there to decide whether or not they're satisfied. And being not satisfied is legally enough to refuse. Most immigration decisions are reviewed on the standard of reasonableness, and this is different from correctness. And the standard isn't based on, would someone else have approved this application? It's based on, is there a logical, rational path from the evidence to the decision? The reasonableness standard requires that there be a rational, logical chain of thought from the evidence to the decision. It doesn't matter if someone else would have made a different decision. And it puts the burden on the applicant to persuade and satisfy the immigration officer that they should be approved a work permit, not just that they're eligible. And this means there's not a single correct outcome. There's a range of acceptable outcomes. And that's why if you're unable to satisfy an officer and they can connect the evidence to the refusal in a logical way, even if a different officer might have approved the application. Under the standard of reasonableness, officers are allowed to weigh evidence, decide what they find persuasive, draw inferences, and make credibility judgments. And that's why we see refusals even when an approval could also be justified. And this is why refusals can often feel unfair and why they can still stand up under review. The officer doesn't have to prove that you failed. They only have to explain why you didn't persuade them. And courts aren't there to decide if a different decision could have been made. They step in when key evidence is ignored, when the logic contradicts itself, or the conclusion can't be justified based on the evidence on record. A refusal does not have to be the best decision. It only has to be a defensible one. And that's why eligibility alone doesn't protect you. So here's how officers actually decide. Once eligibility is met, immigration officers shift to another question. Am I persuaded? And that persuasion usually turns on three key factors. Number one, can you actually do the job? Officers ask, do the duties make sense? Do they align with the occupation and the company's business activities? And is the applicant actually qualified? Proving your eligibility might say you're allowed to work. You have the qualifications. But persuasion asks whether you can perform this job for this employer right now, which is why meeting the minimum requirements isn't enough. Number two, will you leave Canada if required? This is where temporary intent matters. Not just saying you'll leave, but offering a persuasive story that makes sense and is credible. Officers look for logic. They look for your proof of ties. And they look for future plans that are well thought out and supported in evidence, so they don't have to take your word for it. The reality is you can meet every eligibility rule and still be refused. If the officer isn't persuaded, you'll comply with the temporary nature of your permit. And number three, is the employer and job offer credible? Your eligibility doesn't validate the employer. Officers also assess your employer. They evaluate the business viability, consistency of the job description, ability to pay, and compliance history. If the job offer doesn't feel real or sustainable, the officer doesn't need proof of fraud to refuse. They only need a reasonable basis for doubt. So now that we know how officers decide, here are the traps that many people fall into. Trap 1, treating forms as proof. Forms state facts. They don't prove them. Officers treat forms as claims, not evidence. You have to back up all of the claims with external proof to substantiate the qualifications you're claiming. Trap 2, assuming that officers will ask if something is missing. If you haven't explained something that matters, like your proof of temporary intent or qualifications or ability to do the job, don't assume officers are going to ask for additional clarification or evidence. If there's a gap in your application, officers will fill it themselves, and it often doesn't bode well in your favor. And trap 3, confusing completeness with strength. A complete application can still be weak. It has all the forms, you provided the minimum documents required to fill all the spots on the document checklist. Completeness allows you to submit the application, but strength is submitting a persuasive application that convinces and satisfies an officer they should approve you. Now, this isn't information that you find readily on IRCC's website. And I'll often hear people say, you don't need to pay for support with your application. It's all available online. The reality is, the program pages explain eligibility. They don't explain discretion. So if you remember one thing from this episode, make it this: eligibility gets you in the room. Persuasion gets you approved. If your application only proves eligibility, you're leaving approval to chance. And Canadian courts have established that chance favors officers. So now the obvious question becomes, if persuasion is what matters, what persuades an officer? And in the next episode, I'm going to break down the common reasons officers don't believe an applicant can do the job, even when there's a real job offer on the table. And if you want free tools and templates to help you build your application, check out Navio HQ. It's your hub for all things Canadian immigration, built by experts and completely free to you. Click the link below to sign up and make sure you're subscribed to get notifications when the next episode drops.